Hey, sports fans, what's going on? We're back. We're back. Welcome back to Browns Only. Hey, it's your host, your friend Rudy, back to bring you some updates. What's going on in the NFL, mainly with your favorite team, the Cleveland Browns. Right now, the Browns, after finishing the season 5-12 on a two-game winning streak, where beat Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh led Aaron Rodgers' team, and also Burrow and the Bengals in the final 17th game. Again, the Browns go 5-12, winning their last two, led by Shador down the stretch, who started, basically the last 7 games, went 3-4. We're going to talk about the coaching vacancy that's yet to be filled for the Cleveland Browns, understanding the Rooney Rule a little bit better. So we'll get started with that in just a moment. Did want to just update you on the AFC and NFC championship games happening this weekend. Congratulations to Denver. By now, you know that they won that overtime game, in which they also, that was against Buffalo. They also lost their starting quarterback, Bo Nix, in that game to a broken ankle in overtime. That was one of the coaching vacancies that did happen, was McDermott being fired by Buffalo after that loss, in which Josh Allen had quite a few turnovers. Obviously, they'll be facing New England. New England coming in, being led by Vrabel and, of course, Drake May. And they'll be in the AFC Championship game facing off against each other tomorrow. So, again, we're at the end of January here. What's the date? The 24th, I do believe. Absolutely. So, again, the AFC and NFC Championship game will be tomorrow. The Rams will face off against the Seahawks in the NFC West battle. Of course, we have likely the NFL MVP, if it's not Drake May, Matthew Stafford facing off against a reinvigorated Sam Darnold. We're going to talk a little Baker Mayfield later in this show. Again, we're going to talk about the Rooney Rule. We'll talk about Stefanski. Obviously, he got let go from the Browns. He's now the Falcons head coach. Harbaugh, I hadn't got a chance to tell you guys about that. I get John and Jim confused, so forgive me if I do that. But John Harbaugh got fired by the Ravens after he lost the play-in, play-out game, I guess you could say, for the playoffs against the Steelers. Tomlin stepped down. By now, you guys know, but I'll still go through that list just to kind of update you. And with that being said, again, Harbaugh fills the vacancy for the Giants. So the Giants will be led by Harbaugh, massive contract. We don't know if Monken will be following him yet. They're up the OC, but obviously he's a candidate for the Browns. I believe he's completed a second interview with the Browns. We'll go through that list here in a second as well. I wanted to start off by basically defining an updated Rooney Rule, what the Rooney Rule is and what it isn't. What the Rooney Rule is when a team has a head coaching vacancy, they must interview in person 2 minority candidates. Now, going into this process, I'm not going to lie to y'all and say that I knew that Mike McDaniel was a minority. That's the first thing. Number 2, Kevin Stefanski's not a minority. I don't know where that came from, bro. But that's what's going on in Atlanta. Baker Mayfield, the beef with that. We'll talk about that in a second. I get ahead of myself. But Nate Shieldhouse is most certainly a minority candidate, but he's also the pass game coordinator for the Rams. And they're still in the playoffs, right? So we just touched on that. And the Browns show extreme interest in him. And also Grant Udinski, who is the OC for the Jaguars as of now, but he's also interviewed with the Bills as well. He is not a minority. But I wanted to emphasize that one thing, Udinski, Shieldhouse, I don't know, that isn't this. But I think I don't want to speculate about anybody's race. Shieldhouse, I believe, is mixed race, but he was the former quarterback of Illinois some years back, and he also was, I believe, the offensive coordinator at Iowa State under Matt Campbell. So he has some valuable experience. And obviously, as the Rams pass game coordinator, he is under McVay, which is, kind of the coveted name when it comes to coaching circles. So before I delve too far into the Rooney Rule, how the Browns haven't satisfied it in one measure, even though they have, obviously, a minority GM and Andrew Berry. There's a guy, Tom Telesco, who's been brought in to consult on the coaching vacancy for the Browns. I just want to briefly recap, all the vacancies that are still available, but then some that have been filled, right? So we talked about the Giants. We talked about the Falcons. The interesting thing about the Falcons, kind of jumping ahead of myself, is, not only does Stefanski obviously get hired by the Falcons, right? He'll also be in the NFC South to go against Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield to this is obviously very Browns related, not really relevant. Didn't want to delve into it too much, but I thought it extremely interesting. Baker Mayfield said, basically, look forward to playing you, coach, when the team, I'm paraphrasing a tweet that he had, when the team threw me out like garbage, you didn't give me a text. Look forward to playing you twice a year. We have the Falcons. I'm saying the Browns. We have the Falcons and the Bucks on the schedule next year. So we have the NFC South. So that'll be fantastic. Must see TV. The other part about the Falcons, I'm going to come back to it. He, with Stefanski down to Atlanta, he did, with be down there with obviously the owner blank, but he brought down there with them Bill Callahan, the former offensive line coach for the Browns, former, of course, head coach, went down with his son, Scott Callahan, who did end up getting, fired, obviously, as the Titans coach. That was in season. Now, that vacancy actually is now filled by Robert Saleh. But between Callahan, also, excuse me, I was about to sneeze. Tommy Reese was the OC for the Browns, obviously, last year that took over play calling. He's following Stefanski down to Atlanta as well. You know that Atlanta is one of my cities. I got a lot of cities that I frequent. The Bills vacancy is still available. I'm jumping around all over the place. Obviously, that's one of my squads, one of my cities as well. We'll come back and talk to that. I already told you that McDermott was out in Buffalo, but some interesting developments there, like that had Phillip Rivers. What? Dude just played a couple weeks ago. Oh, this is crazy. And then when I talk about the Rooney Rule, one of the things that does frustrate me, though, again, jumping around quite a bit, wanted to keep it a little bit more orderly, but like Eric Bieniemy, he's going to go back as the OC to the Kansas City Chiefs. And also Byron Leftwich, I can't remember where he was at last year. I thought I made a note of it, but Leftwich and Bieniemy to me are two guys that are at least qualified to get a head coach interview. When you talk about a guy like Phillip Rivers getting an interview, not saying he's not qualified or anything like that. I'm just saying when you look at a Leftwich, you look at a Bieniemy, I would have put both of those very high on my list of OCHC candidates, but I don't think that they're getting really, the buzz that they should. And again, to me, that's where the Rooney Rule comes in. And you'll see in the media, mainstream media, I'm not obviously, but you will see that there is some, outcry. There's also in this country right now pushback on DEI, right? But it does seem like, the Rooney Rule has like increased its requirements, right? And for example, the Browns have met requirements in terms of, I wouldn't say that, but they've done some virtual interviews, right? Like with, I'll go through that list here shortly of like who all the Browns have interviewed. But again, remember, it has to be 2 in-person interviews, like I defined at the beginning of the show. So we talked about the Giants, the Falcons, Stefanski again bringing Callahan and also Reese down there with them for the offense. They're going to keep the defensive coach in place. Matt Ryan is actually who is basically, I don't know, he's like the team president there. And him and Stefanski have like kind of a bond that goes back to Philadelphia, or at least their families. So that I would say maybe was even a predictable hire. Some shout recently for the hire based off like the makeup of the city of Atlanta and the Falcons fan base. Jamel Hill was one in particular that voiced their displeasure. I won't go too far into that because I'm doing my own report, standing on my own work here. Another thing that happened, man, Jesse Minter got hired by the Ravens. Now, I think one thing that happened as well is Jesse Minter did decline to interview with the Browns. He was not the only person to have done that. Mike McDaniel was one that actually I think he did do an interview, but I don't think it was in person, and he declined a second interview. So the Browns were hoping that he would satisfy, one part of the Rooney Rule for them with the in-person interview. But actually, Mike McDaniel accepted, and again, he's the former Miami coach that was fired this past year, and they were hoping that they would satisfy that rule, a part of it, at least half of it, with him. But he accepted the Chargers head coaching job, but he also just interviewed with Buffalo after that, which I thought was crazy after just getting hired. But what do I know? Again, we talked about Robert Saleh being hired in Tennessee. So that's 4 vacancies that are filled right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. So we got the Giants, Falcons, Ravens, Titans. Jeff Hafley is going to be the head coach of Miami. He is the defensive coordinator for the Packers, or the former defensive coordinator. Also rumored to, the Browns have an interest in him. I believe he declined the interview with the Browns as well. That's becoming a trend, right? So that's 5 spots that are filled. And what I have now showing is that there are the Raiders, the Cardinals, the Steelers, the Bills, and the Browns that all still have vacancies yet to be filled. I did mention that Phillip Rivers, again, the former Chargers QB, more recently the former Colts QB, just played for them, coming off the couch a few weeks ago. He interviewed, and I would say Daboll is like the leading candidate for the Bills, whatever inside information I have. I know there is strong interest for the Raiders, in particular for offensive coordinator of the Seahawks, current offense coordinator, right? He's still in the playoffs. Clint Kubiak, who was somebody I had a lot of interest in for the Browns early on, and they were rumored to want to bring in as OC last year. So, I mean, that's kind of where we stand in terms of who has filled positions and what positions are still open. Now, I wanted to get down into the nitty gritty a little bit and the rumor mill about the Browns head coaching vacancy. Some of the things I've already touched on, like a little bit of my frustration, maybe with not satisfying any parts of the Rooney Rule yet. And then also we'll go through the coaching candidates. It's not that I have an issue with them. I'm trying to be kind of open-minded as to who they go with the next coach. But let's take a little look into history real quick, because sometimes history can be the best predictor of, maybe future events, right? So let's look at the track record of hiring head coaches for Jimmy Haslam so far. So more recently, right, Kevin Stefanski, he was here for 6 years, 45-56 record. That's under 500, but I mean, there were some playoff appearances, couple playoff wins. Before that was Freddie Kitchens, who went 6-10 in his one season. All right, and then Hugh Jackson, 336-1. If I did that for Kitchens, what am I gonna do for Hugh Jackson? So yeah, hilarious Jackson. But Hugh said he did so bad. He said maybe it'll look better if I said that they gave me money to take. I don't know. Who might have called Hugh a liar? All right, but I know that there was another coaching candidate. Was it McDermott? I think it was McDermott. McDermott was one of the people that was being pushed for to be the head coaching hire. One of the last times the Browns had a head coaching vacancy, but instead it was Hugh Jackson from 2016 to 2018, who went 336-1. And yes, he was the author and the I don't know what you want to say, the antithesis of the 0-16 season for the Browns. Ridiculous. Mike Pettin, 10-22. I really thought his record was better than that overall as a coach. And finally, Chud, who could forget Rob Chudinski, went 4-12. I thought his record was a little better than that. But these are hires of futility. I just kind of wanted to touch on that just to say that, that's not exactly a sparkling review of, kind of what this Haslam has done previously. Again, instead of like Hadid Podesta that's in there to consult now, and obviously Andrew Berry playing a large part in the coaching interviews. Again, Telesco in there to advise. I don't know how well it's going on. I'm gonna give you a list of some of the interviews coaches that the Browns have interviewed. So Dan Pitcher is one. He's a Cincinnati OC. Then call plays for Cincinnati, but he's also the former quarterback coach of the Bengals as well. So, obviously had a lot of success with Burrow there. Aiden Dirty. So this is interesting candidate, being that he is, I believe, British, but also of, I believe, some African descent as well. So he would satisfy Rooney Rule if he'd had an in-person interview thus far. But he's the Seattle defensive coordinator who, for what it's worth, I don't think it plays as big of a role. You don't call plays as a defensive coordinator, but hey, what do I know sometimes when it'll come to that? But he is their current defensive coordinator, and he was interviewed, at least for the Browns, for a first round of interview. And Nate Shieldhouse, again, I mentioned him earlier in the show, former Illinois quarterback. Also, again, coached at Iowa State as an OC and is a pass game coordinator for the Rams under McVay. Grant Udinsky is probably the other favorite for the position right now. Udinsky, excuse me, let me get the pronunciation right. He is in the Jaguars OC, who is not a play caller, but he did also work in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell, Mike Pettin, Flores, I believe, may even been there at the time, for what that's worth. But I know that that's actually one guy I didn't mention yet is Flores. I do view him, even though he went back to Minnesota to be the defensive coordinator again. I view him because the Steelers' job is still open, as the favorite for the Steelers opening. Right, Flores. Don't forget, just kind of like Gruden. Even though he is currently coaching in the NFL, did have basically legal situation with the NFL. So I don't know to what extent that plays a factor. I would think, if you really want him to be your coach, then, for example, like the Steelers, who have had a recent interview with them, then I don't think that would be an obstacle. Now, again, the Browns did at some point interview Tommy Rees, but obviously he got hired to move on down to Atlanta with Kevin Stefanski. So I don't think that was ever really too much. The Browns really said they weren't going to pursue Tommy Rees as a head coach candidate with this kind of, more or less really lack of experience. Jim Schwartz is very much in play as the Browns head coach. But the interesting thing about Jim Schwartz is, man, he's so comfortable with the defense. The defense so comfortable with him. Miles having his best, league in the year. Defensive player of the year again last year. The defense, again, very comfortable with Schwartz. Either Schwartz will be back as the DC or he will be the HC. And again, he isn't still in consideration for the HC spot. So those are a few of the names. Now, there is one other name that is still out there that is a Browns head coaching candidate. It's Todd Monken, which I find very interesting because at some point, similar to like McDaniel, for example, being the OC in for the Chargers, or Flores staying the DC for Minnesota. Monken is suspected, at least, to be likely to go to the Giants to be their OC. I don't think that's a guarantee, though. He hasn't been hired in that position, and he is, again, at least in consideration for the Browns head coaching job. He's done a second interview. He also does not satisfy any aspects of the Rooney Rule. Of course not. But, McDaniel, you never know. Maybe Monken got some, maybe his grandma was native. Let me stop playing, man. Let me stop playing. The only reason I'm not crazy about Monken as a candidate is because I don't mean to be ageist, because, like, for example, Schwartz is 60. He was a former Detroit Lions coach, but Schwartz got the energy. He got a little bit of swagger to him. Monken, from what I hear, because he was a former OC under Kitchens. Remember when I just mentioned that Kitchens was here and didn't have a successful year when we had Odell and Jarvis? Monken's a good OC. He was an OC down in Georgia where he did a very good job for the Ravens. But they say he's just like, he's a disciplinarian, which is good, but they say he's kind of just like grumpy. I don't know. Like I can kind of I can relate to that a little bit more. I'm getting a little bit older sometimes, like, but usually I like to bring the energy. I like to be positive, man. So You got to bring that juice and bring that energy. So when I look at a Udinski, a Shieldhouse, or a like a Schwartz, even with you got a good vibe to him, good energy, right? Um, I think that that's kind of a little bit opposite than Monken, who maybe is a disciplinarian potentially like Shorts, meaning he's not going to take a lot of he's not going to take a lot of that stuff that some players might do. Hey, I'm not practicing today. I don't know that anybody's doing that, or I'm having these performance lapses. Makes me think of, I hate to even bring this guy up, but like Jerry Judy, dropping the ball. Again, with accountability, you would say cause and effect. Maybe accountable looks like not getting as many snaps, which I think maybe did happen a little bit down the stretch last year. But now I digress. Again, those are some of the main candidates. We talk about Schwartz, Monken still around, Grumpy Monken. I like that. That might stick. But then also Shieldhouse and Udinski, who are actually the two young guys. Now, I didn't mention Shieldhouse's age and Udinski's age. Udinski, if he's hired, Grant Udinski, he would be the youngest head coach ever, basically younger than McVay, be 30, I think, going to the position. And then Shieldhouse a little bit older at 35. So I don't know what that's to say. You know what I did want to get a chance to do though is touch on like a little bit of QB talk at the end of the show. I've already, talked about what jobs, are still open. So right now, for example, the Cardinals, the Raiders jobs are still open, of course, along with the Browns. But then you still have the Bills and the Steelers jobs that are open. Now, here's my prediction for you: the Bills and the Steelers job will probably get filled before those other three jobs. So that's Arizona, the Raiders, and the Browns, because they're much more attractive. I would just say the Steelers in terms of the stability of the organization or franchise, but of course the Bills are like in Super Bowl ready position. I do believe like Mike Dable and Flores, they seem like perfect fits and like slam dunks, but you never know what the holdup might be there. There may be any of those coaches like a Kubiak, for example, or even oh man, there's the Shula for the Chris Shula for the Rams. Believe he's their DC. So you never know where those guys might fit into the mix in either Pittsburgh or Buffalo, which are the other two openings. Other than the Raiders, again, the Raiders having the first overall pick makes that job a little bit more attractive, say, than the Cardinals. And I think that the Browns probably fall in between those two. Now, some people argue, the Brown Steelers job are either more attractive because neither of them for sure have a quarterback. Don't forget with the Steelers, Aaron Rodgers likely will not be back unless they say hire like Mike McCarthy or something like that. You never know, crazier things have happened, but it looks like it might be the Will Howard, Mason Rudolph era in Pittsburgh. However, you never, there's people out there, Kyler Murray, Tua. So in fact, while I mentioned those two guys, I did want to actually hit you guys with a list of like some free agent QBs for next year. So these guys will be free agents in this offseason. So when we look at the QB position for the Browns, for me, down the stretch, you know, the 7 games out of Shador, there's some ups and downs. I believe it was 7 passing touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 1 rushing touchdown. Regardless, to me, it's going to need to be some level of competition brought in. I'm hearing a lot of people say, you're running back with those 3 QBs, if you would, Dylan Gabriel, Shador Sanders, and Deshaun Watson. Unless of an open competition, depending on who the coach is, it could affect a lot of that. But in any event, I wanted to touch on at least some names of some QBs that, are rumored to be available via free agency. We'll touch on this more later. And I'll especially will come back and break down some of the guys that will be in the draft, whether it's a Ty Simpson, Mendoza, even going a little bit deeper than that, guys like Carson Beck that'll be in this draft. But I did want to touch on one of the first names that potentially be available at free agency and quarterback for the new coach, maybe whether it's a Grant Udinski or Schwartz or Shieldhouse. Hey, he might want to look at Kenny Pickett again. I know. Ha ha ha. I jest. Ha ha. No, but Jimmy G. Anybody? Can I interest you in some Jimmy G? Hey, you know he got the bad ones, but I don't know about him playing quarterback anymore. This ain't what 2019. San Francisco, right? So Jimmy G's probably best days behind him. Mitch Trubisky. Hey, Mitch Trubisky's from Mentor. And that's a guy that I for many years free agency I was like, I can see Mr. Trubisky being a backup here. Another guy, just like Kenny Pickett, who was here, this offseason, Case Keenum. He was here before. One of the, I don't know, more experienced backups in the league, if you want to say. Trey Lance. I actually like that one, man, because Trey Lance, maybe he's got a semi high ceiling, but I don't know. I feel that obviously he was a high pick in the draft and he's got some tools. Basically, man, if I'm looking at it from Cleveland's perspective, regardless who the coach is, I just want to bring in quality competition, a veteran that has some experience. I don't know that Trey Lance necessarily fits that profile because he doesn't really have a lot of meaningful snaps, in live NFL games, but he does have some, right? And he's definitely experienced some of the ups and downs, So maybe he's one of those guys that could be a redemption story, a la Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, right? But we'll see. Brandon Allen, Tennessee quarterback. I will raise you a Brandon Allen. I'll give you a Will Levis. I think that guy might be available. Ironically, Malik Willis will be that guy that'll be available too, and he'll probably be the most sought after guy on this list. Josh Johnson, you probably won't look for him till about week 14. I got a buddy who's advocating for getting Josh Johnson early in the free agent process. And no, no. Josh Johnson don't show up until about week 13. He probably has other obligations up until then. His FedEx company is doing very well now. But Carson Wentz, if I didn't name him, obviously he dealt in Minnesota last year. So we talk about some of the free agent quarterbacks that will potentially be available. I did want to mention, we're around the time of NFL honors. Miles, of course, defensive player of the year with his 23 sacks, setting the single season record. Defensive player of the year, Carson Schlesinger, again, had a great year, 148 tackles this past season. Again, great job to the defense. That's why Schwartzy's coming back in one capacity, either DC or the HC. When we look at, kind of how Shador fared, in terms of the rookie QBs. Again, Shador, about 7 games. They say 6 games started. Actually, I think it was 7. But he had, again, 8 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. You look around the league, some of the other rookies who started games at QB, Tyler Shuck, credited with 8 starts, 11-5, 21-25 for the yards 8 through 4. Jackson Dart started 11 games, 22 total touchdowns. I believe like 15 of them were passing, but only 5 interceptions. That actually does look pretty impressive. 2,042 passing yards. Cam Ward, he pretty much played the whole season. Started 16 games, 16 total touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 3,117 yards. So the only reason I say that is to kind of give you the full picture. Like, I'm high on Shador. I'm a very big fan. There's been lots of different ways I've wanted to kind of combat some of the narratives that have been attached to him. And I think one now that's unfair is that his play affects the viability of the Browns coaching position or its attractiveness to candidates. Now, I do think that that's a false narrative as well. I think that if there was any leg to stand on, for example, because I consume a lot of media myself. I'm not like a player where I could say I don't listen to any of that, I don't watch that. They do too anyway. But I think that there's, again, somewhat of a narrative that this is a very unattractive head coaching position, not only because you have a meddling owner, which, I mean, that part may be true, but he does spend money. So I'm not really down on Haslam like that. I would say this, man. Cleveland has always been kind of in a league of their own, in terms of the way they do things. So this coaching search is kind of no different, because one of the things I'm hearing, and I forgot to bring this out in the show recently, just like last night, I'm hearing that again. I mentioned the name Tom Telesco because the Browns. I don't know if they're the only people doing this. I would hear rumors like the Browns have a track record of doing, let's say, interesting things in coaching interviews, right? Or asking interesting questions or doing things differently than other organizations when they have their interviews. So it may be intimidating to people. You've seen some people, for example, I think even Shula was one mentor, for example, that said, I'm tight. I don't even want to do any more interviews with you. I don't want that job. Mike McDaniel, he was one. And again, maybe it's just that he doesn't want to be a head coach immediately. Again, that's why he's taking the Chargers OC spot, but he also interviewed with the Bills, right? So I hear that the Browns are like quizzing their coaching candidates, making them write essays, for example, taking like, I don't know, like personality test type of thing, which I don't really think is like a bad thing, even though that it is unique. But I could see how, like, for example, the outward perception, if you're describing that, hey, the Browns did something different than when I went to interview with the Dolphins or with the Falcons. They had me taking these tests, and that just makes people say, man, that's that owner. You know what I mean? Like, we're different, man. We different. The elf is repping different, man. So hey, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say at this point about Brownie the Elf. And he's the one. Brownie, though, Elf is really the one doing the coaching interviews. That's what I think at this point now. And he's playing all kind of tricks, getting people to cancel the interviews. So now I'm conspiracy theory. But no, there is some validity to, again, the Browns always kind of having what in the past kind of turned the smartest guy in the room. Maybe complex. I don't know. Again, obviously Andrew Berry's still there. One of those higher education, Ivy League guys. Stefanski was the same. Of course, he's out of here. I'm not really sad about that. And I think that Baker drama, that was a little bit of insight into, for example, why he's not here. And I think that you can go revisionist history and say, Derek, I call him Derek now. You only get nicknames when you ball out. Derek Watson, a lot of people will point at that and say that's the precipice of the downfall of the Browns. Sure. But again, don't forget, that was a cause and effect. That was after choosing basically not to pick up the 5th-year option on Baker because Baker was acting like an infant, basically. And Baker's not going to obviously tweet that and say, I was in my feels. I was acting like a kid. I was immature at that point. No, you ain't got to take ownership on social media. Who does that? Right? So let's not forget that's the big part, right? Is managing those relationships. You know what I mean? Maybe the relationship got a little bit better with Shador down the stretch for Stefanski, but why wasn't he starting the season? And it seemed like he was the player with the most upside, that could, potentially win games by stretching the field. Now, again, I know we started off with the coaching candidate show, understanding the Rooney Rule. Again, just to summarize, the main thing about the Rooney Rule is you have to have 2 minority coaches in for interview in person, right? Can't just be virtual interviews before you hire your head coach. Right now, the Browns have 0 such interviews done. I'm not amused. However, I will say that I'm available on Wednesdays and Sundays. So if you do choose to interview me, I will take the interview. I do have some former coaching experience. That's why I was happy to do this coach show. I wasn't sure how I was going to do this show because I'm like, coaches, like people don't really know the coaches like that. Like, Stefanski, right? But like Mike McDaniel, he used to coach here. A lot of these coaches used to coach here. Man, I saw something very interesting, like the coaching tree under Mike Pettin, man. Oh my gosh, there was a lot of coaches that are in the league. And just some of the coaches that have been through here, whether it's again a Mike McDaniel, a Jeff Hafley, and I do think part of it is a little sad that these guys don't have too much of an interest in coming back though. So I mean, even Harbaugh, he's family from Ohio, has Ohio ties, and he was like, I don't know parts of that show, Or maybe it was a little bit of loyalty to still the Ravens. But you see, they didn't have no loyalty. And again, I know I touched on it, but Tomlin stepped down, and don't look for him to be in the mix. But remember, McDermott just got fired in Buffalo, man. And at one point, AB wanted to, I think, hire McDermott. They have some ties going back to Philadelphia, I do believe. So, I mean, that's a long shot name because the Browns have not interviewed him. First, they got to satisfy the Rooney Rule. But like I said, hey, you guys can call me 937-355-2137. If you want to leave like a voicemail just with your thoughts about the Browns QB, or excuse me, coaching search, or again, if the Browns want to set up a time for an interview, um, I'll come up to Berea, man. It's cool. I could do an in-person interview that could satisfy one of them. And also, I did also hear that the Browns declined the opportunity to interview Neon Dion Primetime Sanders, also known as Coach Prime. I don't think that was cool at all. Like at this point, I'm not gonna say beggars can't be choosers. The Browns are the beggars in this case. We need a minority candidate to come in. We don't care if you're black. Hey, you just gotta be non-white. You gotta be a POC. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't see what the harm would have been to allow Dion to come in for an interview. But man, now I'm just going on expressing my views about the thing. I think also would have been like a sign of respect or a chance to like pick his brain even more in a professional setting to see maybe what might work for Shador. Maybe offer him another position on the staff, even if you really wouldn't have interest in him being the HC. And I don't think that compensation would be anywhere close to what he's getting paid in Colorado. So that's a mute point. So I'm going to end the stream on that note. Peace and love to y'all. I will talk to y'all soon, man. We definitely going to talk some football leading up to this draft and free agency. Browns only. Rudy Rule signing off. Talk to you soon. Peace. Love you. I'll at you.